مرحبا وأهلا بكم في برنامج داخل واشنطن. معكم مضيفكم روبرت ساتلوف. على غرار ما كانت افتتاحية سلسلة أفلام حرب النجوم، ربما لتقوله قبل وقت طويل في مجرة بعيدة كان الأمريكيون الأفارقة كلهم جمهوريين. إبراهام لينكولن الذي أصدر إعلان تحرير العبيد محررا الرقيق كان أول رئيس جمهوري، وعلى مدى جيلين بعد وفاته دعم الناخبون السود ذكراه والسياسات التي دعا إليها الجمهوريون. وقد تغير ذلك إبان الكساد الكبير خلال الثلاثينات من القرن العشرين، حين شكل فرانكلين روزفلت تحالفا جديدا من الأقليات الإثنية الليبراليين والفقراء البيض والسود، وهو التحالف الذي غير شكل سياستنا. ومنذ ذلك الحين صوت غالبية الأمريكيين السود لصالح الحزب الديمقراطي. ولكن النظرة المقربة على نتائج انتخابات 2020 تدل على شيء من التغيير. بعد 4 أعوام من رئاسة دونالد ترامب صوت عدد أكبر من الرجال السود والنساء السود لصالح المرشح الجمهوري في 2020 مما فعلوا في 2016. في الواقع صوت قرابة 20% من الرجال السود لصالح دونالد ترامب. هل يعتقد الأمريكيون السود أن لهم مستقبلا في الحزب الجمهوري؟ أم أن هذا التحول كان مجرد نتيجة غريبة للانتخابات؟ لمناقشة السلوك الانتخابي للسود والحزبين السياسيين يسرني أن أرحب برولاند مارتن وترنت دافي. Welcome back to Dakhel, Washington. The verdict is in. I'm talking about the verdict of the Derek Chauvin George Floyd murder trial in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Guilty on all charges. And across America, millions are heaving a sigh of relief at what just occurred. We'll talk about this today with our very special guests, Roland Martin and Trent Duffy. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us. We're meeting just in the wake of this verdict. Roland, what is the impact of this verdict?
Well, obviously, history in being that Derek Chauvin is the first white police officer in Minnesota history to be convicted for something along these lines. It's not justice, it's accountability. George Floyd is still dead. I think what it also, I've had law enforcement experts, longtime police officers who have said the only way you're going to truly achieve accountability is when officers see other officers go to prison for their actions. And I think that's important. You've seen the Maryland legislature override the veto of Governor Larry Hogan getting rid of the Officer Bill of Rights. You're looking at people talking about how do you get rid of qualified immunity. You know, cities are spending nearly almost $1 billion on settlements on police cases. There has to be accountability, and that's what you see in this case. So I think you're going to see this going forward, where you're cracking that protective shield that the public has when a police officer is either indicted or on trial.
And Trent, what's your reaction?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think there is a big sigh of relief that the judicial process in this case did work, and I think there's going to be more efforts along these lines. It's going to be difficult to have a one-size-fits-all because, to Roland's point, it is a locality-based kinds of decision and thought process, but we do see a lot of the same motivations and drivers in a lot of the localities. So I think it's a step forward. We all witnessed what happened. The entire world saw what happened to Mr. Floyd, and there was a collective tragedy. It was a tragedy for the United States. And so we hope we can use this as an inflection point. There have been, unfortunately, similar tragedies in recent days in the past year and many others. So we've got a long way to go, but I do think it was a good a good day. And again, it doesn't overshadow that Mr. Floyd is still dead because of the police brutality.
Robert, I think I want to add this one thing, and I think that because a lot of people have overlooked this here. The Hennepin County District Attorney initially accepted the police report that was presented to them, and they actually lowered one of the charges. It wasn't until Attorney General Keith Ellison took over the case where they brought that charge back. Look at the case in Chicago, the 13-year-old who was just killed. The prosecutor gets the police report, goes into court, and literally reiterates what's in the police report, which we now know to be a lie based upon the body cam footage. So what we are also seeing, and we're going to have to really begin to do this, that, and I know people will say, well, you know, we saying all cops are bad. No, we're going to have to sit here and say, wait a minute. We have too many examples of police saying one thing in the report and something's totally different when it comes to the body camera footage. We're going to have to be casting a much more rigorous eye. Prosecutors are, as opposed to just believing anything that they say. We saw that in this case, the Laquan McDonald case with Jason Van Dyke, in the Michael Slager case with Walter Scott, the state's attorney in Prince George's County, a brave boy. She has a list of 15 officers she will not put on the stand because they have problems lying in previous cases on the stand and in reports. And so that's the kind of action that we're going to have to see locales take to make sure the officers are being truthful when it comes to their actions.
So one fascinating aspect of the Chauvin trial was that the police establishment turned out against Chauvin. Instead of standing with him, they suggested that quite clearly that he was the one who broke police regulations and police procedures. Do you think this had a major change ahead, Trent?
Yeah, I think it does, because to Roland's point, there has been this fraternity that they just stand together, and the unions are very heavily involved in this. But there has been a crack, and it's a significant one, and it goes to the level of accountability that Roland's been discussing that we all need, so that everybody gets the full facts and not one side only when it comes to some of these very incredibly sensitive and emotional and tragic developments that happen on the streets of America every day. The body cameras has been a huge development. Fortunately, in this case, there was a witness standing by who filmed the whole thing, and the whole world got to see. So more accountability, showing what's on the video, and having a trial by jury. In this case, it worked well because there was enough evidence that everybody could weigh the full evidence involved. So I think it was a huge step forward, and I think we're going to see more and more efforts like this.
So let me put this in the issue in a broader political perspective, if I can. Roland, what's the impact going to be on the millions of people who came out across the country under the banner of the Black Lives Matter movement after George Floyd was killed that terrible day in Minneapolis?
It's going to be huge, because what you saw here was, you saw the importance of pressure. You saw the importance of protest. You saw what happens when you have folks who also combine the power of the vote. Remember, Keith Ellison was a member of Congress who chose to run for Attorney General in Minnesota. Let's compare two cases. Look at the difference between a progressive Democrat and Keith Ellison as the Attorney General, and a conservative Black Republican in Daniel Cameron, who was the Attorney General in Kentucky. How he led the Breonna Taylor case. When you have I have never in my life, in my career, have I seen grand jurors come out against a prosecutor the way they did in Kentucky. And so you're able to see, again, how two different forces, that's where voting comes in. And so I think you're going to see people now understand how critically important the Attorney General's office is, the District Attorney's office is, because that's really where the rubber meets the road. The problem we've had historically has been DAs who've essentially been co-signers of law enforcement and unwilling to pursue cases. That's why Wesley Bell was elected in St. Louis County when kicking out Bob McCullough. That's why the prosecutor who was in the Tamir Rice case in Cuyahoga County in Cleveland, why he lost in the primary. That's why Marilyn Mosby won in Baltimore. Aramis Ayala won in Florida. So you're seeing Larry Krasner in Philadelphia. So you're seeing the impact of protest, voting, affecting public policy. And now lawmakers are going to have to realize that they're going to have to be attentive.
So Roland says that the verdict is going to help motivate more political activism and getting engaged more in the electoral process among those who came out under the banner of Black Lives Matter. Trent, how is this, if in any way, going to affect, say, the conservative movement? Will people be motivated to act differently, or will people say, you know what, this was a national tragedy that's beyond race, that the right outcome, justice was served? What do you think?
I think it's going to be a bit of both. This is not a clear-cut issue. Conservatives saw the exact same video that Democrats and liberals and progressives and whoever on the political spectrum in American politics saw. I think that there is definitely going to be long-term effects from the Black Lives Matter movement that go well beyond police issues, and that we're seeing that with the voting rights, as Roland mentioned. And I think we're going to see that in other areas. We're going to see it in terms of environmental equity. We're going to see it in terms of the siting of industrial facilities. So I think it's not just the Black Lives Matter movement, but I think it's representative of a broader type of movement in the United States that is bearing itself out in the halls of Congress right now. And it even extends to things like immigration. So I think it's a lasting force in American politics. I think it's a healthy thing. But I think that, like all movements in American politics, it may go into areas where some people in the middle or on the right or center right think they go too far, and that's fine. That's for the American electorate to decide. And that's a conversation that we probably should have, and it's been long overdue.
I really think conservatives are making a huge mistake on this particular issue here. They need to understand it wasn't just Black folks who were out there protesting after George Floyd. You had lots of young whites all across the country who were out there. You had mothers who were out there because they had to witness this man's life literally being just choked out of his body. And what conservatives should be understanding, they should be listening to a Democrat like Val Demings. This is a woman who was a cop for more than 20 years, was a police chief. Her husband also was a top official as well. And so people are saying there must be accountability, and conservatives can't have the knee-jerk reaction of, we stand with law enforcement, but you don't stand with law enforcement when they do wrong.
If I might respond to that, Robert, I think it's painting too broad of a brush to say that conservatives have taken, a solidarity stance on this. Conservatives has always been wary of law enforcement having too much power, and have always been very protective of personal freedom and liberties. And we saw that with the Federal Bureau of Investigations overstepped on some cases, and you see that with a lot of personal liberty things. So conservatives are very wary of law enforcement having too much power. A lot of us on the conservative side are just as outraged and share a lot of the same reactions that most Americans are feeling right now.
All right, we're going to take a break right now. We're going to hold it right there, and then we're going to broaden this conversation out and put it in the context of our two political parties in just a moment here on Dakhel, Washington. Today, our guests talked about the past and future of Black Republicans, which may sound like a contradiction in terms, but that wasn't always the case. And I'm not just talking about Black Republicans who held elected office in numerous states in the Reconstruction era, the decades after our Civil War. I'm talking about the impressive political career of Edward W. Brooke of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the first African American to serve in the United States Senate in 85 years, and with his election in 1966, the first ever to win a popular vote in the Senate, and the first then to win re-election too. An attorney and World War II combat veteran, Brooke was a leader of the liberal wing of the Republican Party. Well, it no longer exists. He was a strong supporter of civil rights and the first Republican senator to call for Richard Nixon's impeachment. Since Brooke, there have been 8 other African-American senators, including a man named Barack Obama, but only one, Tim Scott of South Carolina, was also a Republican. Again, my guests today include Roland Martin. Roland is one of America's most insightful journalists with unique insight into the issues that touch the lives of Black Americans. Over the years, he served as a talk show host on TV One, a host and analyst with CNN, and a senior analyst on the Tom Joyner Morning Show. He's also a widely read author with such books as The First, President Barack Obama's Road to the White House. Also joining us is Trent Duffy. Trent is one of Washington's best-known professionals at strategic communications and media relations. He served in the George W. Bush White House for 4 years, including as Deputy Press Secretary and Communications Director for the Office of Management and Budget. He is currently Managing Director at Sard Verbinnen, a leading global public relations consulting firm. All right, gentlemen, let's expand this conversation to a discussion of the mixing of our issues. There was a time, a long time ago, when Black Americans voted Republicans. That, of course, changed with Roosevelt. And ever since, Black Americans have been firmly in the Democratic camp. But surprisingly, we saw a very interesting development in the 2020 election. Surprising because it especially came after 4 years of Donald Trump. Black men and Black women increased their vote for Republicans over 2016. Put differently, significantly greater proportions of African Americans, relatively, not in absolute numbers, voted for Hillary Clinton more than Joe Biden. How could that have been? Roland?
Oh, it's easy to explain. I've been talking about these issues for a number of years. President Joe Biden was significantly hurt in terms of those numbers because of his support being the author of the 1994 crime bill. What you're seeing with Black men actually is not even, it didn't start with Donald Trump. Black men, you're talking largely a lot number of Black men who've been with police, individuals who are small business owners, who hate both parties, who feel as if both parties have completely ignored them. The fundamental problem for Republicans is that they just across the board just won't even talk to Black people, won't even communicate with Black people. Second of all, you got an issue with voter suppression. Look, Common in the song "Glory," which won the Oscar in the movie Selma, he said freedom is like a religion to us. And Black Republicans have been telling the party, look, y'all are not going to be able to get Black folks to even listen to you if you continue these policies. Colin Powell was called out for Pat McCrory in North Carolina in his face at a CEO forum on that very issue in 2013. I know Bob Brown, who was a top aide to Richard Nixon, African American, was a lieutenant for Dr. King. He's been trying to tell them. I've known Black Republicans my entire life. The party has to listen to Black Republicans before you think you're gonna even talk to Black folks who voting Democrat. Right, so if you're ignoring the Black Republicans, you're in trouble.
So let me ask Trent. Trent, is there hope for the Republican Party to make real inroads with Black Americans?
Well, I think there is, and I think you saw that a little bit in some of the changes that you just mentioned. I mean, look what Donald Trump did with with sentencing reform and some of these other things. There was outreach, and there's other celebrities in the Black community, and I'm certainly no expert like Roland, but who have said that neither party is serving their interests, and that there is a recognition amongst the Black community that for years and years and years they voted rock solid with Democrats, and what do we have to show for it?
Thank you both, Roland Martin and Trent Duffy, for everything from the George Floyd trial to voting rights across America. Thank you for joining us in Dakhel, Washington. The year 2021 is only a few months old, and we have already lost too many Americans. Let's take a moment from our hectic lives to remember two of them. Two Black Americans whose remarkable accomplishments, both in 1974, left an indelible mark on my memory. The first is Cicely Tyson, an extraordinary actress who died on January 28th at the age of 96. Miss Tyson had a remarkable career, and her accomplishments on stage and screen were legendary. But people of my generation can be forgiven for thinking she had passed away decades ago, because she delivered a performance in 1974 that will be forever etched in my mind. That was the year she appeared on television in the movie The Autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, the story of a 110-year-old woman recounting life from the time she was a slave through a century of American history. I can still remember watching it at our family television, the one with just 3 functioning channels. In much the same way the series Roots exposed America to the Black experience for the very first time, so too did Miss Tyson's searing performance, playing every decade of Pittman's life from youth to very old age, opening our eyes to the trials and tribulations of Black women in America. There is much about that experience I will never know, but Miss Tyson showed it to me and showed millions of people like me the idea that we ought to know more, that experience is as much part of the American story, perhaps more than any other chapter of our history. The second person we lost is Hank Aaron, an amazing athlete who died on January 22nd at the age of 86. Hammerin' Hank, as he was known, was celebrated for breaking one of the longest held records in baseball, Babe Ruth's record of 714 home runs, a record that stood for 33 years. And Hank Aaron did it exactly the opposite way Babe Ruth did it. He did it with modesty and consistency, patience and grace. Mr. Aaron didn't talk a lot. He let his bat do the talking for him. His durability was remarkable. He hit 24 or more home runs every year from 1955 to 1973. And the fact that he, a Black man, broke the record playing for a team in the Deep South, the Atlanta Braves, made the accomplishment even more historic. He tied Ruth in his first at-bat in the 1974 season, and then just a couple of days later, sent a ball over the fence in Atlanta to break the new record. I watched it on the same old TV that I saw Miss Jane Pittman, and I can remember the excitement and energy like it was yesterday. Baseball has never been the same. Sadly, we will lose more people in 2021, and when we do, I will pause to remember the unforgettable. Cicely Tyson and Hank Aaron were certainly on that list. بهذا نصل لنهاية هذه الحلقة من برنامج داخل واشنطن. إذا كانت لديكم أي استفسارات أو تعليقات حول هذه الحلقة، وخاصة حول السياسات الأمريكية المتغيرة في أمريكا، أرجو أن تتواصلوا معي عبر تويتر على هاشتاج Inside Washington أو أن تراسلوني مباشرة على @RobSatloff. سأراكم الأسبوع المقبل، وإلى أن ألقاكم شكرا لكم وإلى اللقاء.